Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video. Today we're going over 11 players that I think are ready to explode in fantasy football. These guys should lead to you, at least making your fantasy football playoffs. Now, a couple of these guys that I'm going to mention don't have the most favorable playoff schedules per se, but at least over the next couple of weeks, they should perform just fine. We're starting it off today with Rashee Rice. Now, I've been buying into the Rashee Rice hype for a while now. I think it's been ever since like week number 6 that I've been on the hype train. I have him on a few fantasy football teams myself, but it's been an up and down journey so far up to this point. From weeks 5 to 7, there was like a hot stretch of him scoring over 10 fantasy points every single game, but the targets just like slowly began to fade out for some reason, and they finally came back in huge fashion in week number 12. His highest target share of the entire season, 24.7 PPR fantasy points here, which was amazing to see. And the best part about it, he saw 10 targets in this game. He also saw the most snaps out of any wide receiver on the team with 40 out of a possible 60, and ran the most routes with 27. And those 10 targets were the most on the team, even more than somebody named Travis Kelce. And it's really starting to show here that Mahomes trusts Rashee Rice over these weeks more and more and more as they go on. And this should continue to be the case for the rest of the season. At least we hope so. Andy Reid is one of the smartest coaches in the entire NFL. And if you don't think he's going to get this guy the ball more when he's performing that good, I don't know what to tell you. Another thing working in Rice's favor is that the number one defensive players on these teams that they go up against are going to be heavily focusing on Travis Kelce and limiting him, because he is, if not the best in the league, one of the best tight ends in the entire National Football League, because you got to throw everything you can to stop this tight end and stop that Mahomes to Kelce combination. Rashee Rice can pick up the slack, let me tell you, and he's going to do so. I think he's just starting to explode. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. Next, we're moving on to somebody on the same team here, Isiah Pacheco. I can't lie. Pacheco sketches me out a little bit, if I'm being totally real with you right now. There are certain weeks where he isn't used as much as I would like, but then he goes out and gets heavy passing volume in week number 12 and scores 25.9 PPR fantasy points, and I'm forced to put him on this list. This is probably the 20th video now that I'm making about Pacheco, on and off, but he has one of the best playoff schedules, and we've been consistent about that on this channel the entire time. You should have that engraved into your brains right now if you've been watching my videos. If he gets the volume in those matchups, they're an absolute cakewalk. All right. New England Patriots, they've been struggling to move the ball. The Kansas City Chiefs, they'll have no problem running the ball down their throat. The Raiders, another team struggling to really score too many points. And then the Bengals, who have Jake Browning at QB now. These are all teams that are very winnable matchups for the Chiefs, and they should be up big in all of those games. Good news about week number 12 is that Pacheco saw 47 out of a possible 60 snaps, while CEH, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, only saw 13. My main concern here is, what is CEH doing on the goal line? Did you guys see that one drive? I don't know. I'm not sure what quarter it was, but they kept CEH in the game on the goal line. Tried to run it, I believe, twice with him. For what? Give Pacheco the ball on all 4 downs within the 5-yard line. The guy's going to score. He's an absolute menace, and he keeps his legs churning the entire way. Eventually, they did bring Pacheco in. I believe it was on 3rd down, and he ended up scoring on that drive. Just put him in on 1st. Make your lives that much easier. We don't need to do anything fancy. Let the man run the ball into the end zone, please. All right. He should explode the rest of the season. I'm telling you right now, this is probably just the beginning, because these matchups, like we said, are an absolute cakewalk. Number 3 on this list, I'm telling you guys, Keaton Mitchell is slowly but steadily going to break out. All right. This week number 12 against the Los Angeles Chargers on Sunday night, was a huge statement game, believe it or not. You might sit here and say, okay, he had 10.9 fantasy points. Is it really that big of a deal? Well, first of all, Gus Edwards had a terrible 4.7 fantasy points on Sunday night. The amazing news in this situation, the amazing takeaway, is that Mitchell led the backfield in snaps, and it wasn't just barely either. He had 13 more snaps than the next closest running back, who was actually Justice Hill and not even Gus Edwards in this game. Gus is 100% on the decline, and Mitchell is on the heavy incline, and it's going to be a rocket ship to the top. Once he gets more snaps, it's going to be an exponential growth situation. You're going sideways, a little bit up, and then he's going to shoot through the ceiling over here. All right, they get the Rams, the Jaguars, the 49ers, and then the Dolphins the rest of the season. Now, I can sit here and I will say to you guys, I wish the schedule was much easier, but the decision right here is pretty simple for me, at least against the Rams and the Jaguars. He is 100,000% pluggable into your lineup at this moment in time, at least for me. Let me know what you guys think, but I think Keaton Mitchell deserves a spot in your lineup. If you're in those deeper leagues, 1,000% put him in your lineups. Next, we have Breece Hall. This one could be slightly controversial, I will say. Usually, I don't like putting players on, I'll say the Jets are a pretty bad team here. They can be inconsistent. Bad teams can be inconsistent with their performances more often than not. But when Breece Hall gets 7 catches in week number 12, I'm definitely taking notice here. But he is purely dependent off his QB situation. If Boyle somehow keeps that starting spot, then Breece Hall could get, upwards of 10 catches per game for the next couple of weeks. If they go back to Zach Wilson, then his value decreases slightly here, but not by too much. He still dominates the snap share over Dalvin Cook on a weekly basis, and that should continue to be the case as the weeks go on. I will say their playoff schedule isn't great at all, but if I have to bet on anybody on this team, if I have to bet on 2 people on this team, it's Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson. But of course, Garrett Wilson is going to be more dependent on the quarterback situation a little bit more than Breece Hall is. So I guess you keep betting on Breece Hall here. He should continue to, be very consistent for you in fantasy. Next up, we got DJ Moore, and this one shouldn't take too much convincing on my end here. When Justin Fields is the quarterback of this team, DJ Moore gets fully unlocked, and he is a complete different player. It's not a coincidence that when Bijan was out there filling in for Fields, Moore's numbers took a major hit. After that 49-point game, he was supposed to be that wide receiver number 1 that you could count on in fantasy, at least for some people. But things, of course, don't always go as expected. Fields got hurt, but now that Fields is back, they can at least start getting that rhythm back, whether it's this week, whether it's next week. I mean, it started last week. You saw it right there. And the Bears' other pass catchers are just not consistent. Darnell Mooney decides to show up maybe, 2-3 games out of the entire year. Tyler Scott's a rookie. He needs more time to develop, clearly. He's not getting involved as much as he should be. Surprisingly, their run game is actually the strong suit of this Bears team, but when that fails them, they're going to have to turn to DJ Moore to convert on those third downs, and of course, the big play potential is always lurking with DJ Moore, so I think he's got to be in all of your lineups heading forward here. Now we go on to Rhamondre Stevenson. Here is another case of an absolutely great player. I had him on my fantasy team the last 2 years prior to this one. Couldn't get him this year on any teams, but he is the only one I can trust on this Patriots team right now. Aside from maybe Pop Douglas, Demario Douglas, at this point in time, up until he got hurt in week 12, he was putting together a great performance. By the way, if you have Pop Douglas on your bench, keep a close eye on him because he could be startable in the very near future. Regardless, Rhamondre Stevenson is getting a ton of carries per game, and he's also adding on that important receiving work, especially in those PPR leagues. He found absolutely no room to run after the catch this past week, but you're going to take those PPR fantasy points for the receptions nonetheless. Look, the bottom line is I'm not saying this is going to be pretty here for Rhamondre Stevenson, and I do apologize for the pain that you're going to have to go through when watching this Patriots offense get on the field. But it will hurt just a little less every time if you have Rhamondre in your lineups and he is the one catching those check down passes. Rest of the season schedule, though, is not great. The Chargers, the Steelers, the Chiefs, the Broncos, and the Bills. All I got to say is they keep giving this guy the ball. He's going to score a ton of fantasy points. And Bill Belichick, you know better. Give the ball to one of your best players in Rhamondre Stevenson. When Pop Douglas comes back, give him the ball. That's your best chance at winning at this point. The quarterback situation is an absolute mess. Doesn't matter who it is. They're both going to want to check it down to Rhamondre more often than not. So his value is still insanely high. Now we move on to a guy that I absolutely love. I've been talking about him for a while now, Josh Downs. All right, you sit here and you see the stat line for week number 12 and you think, it's not great. 5 catches for 43 yards, no touchdowns or anything like that. The thing you really have to focus on here is the 13 targets that he received, which tied Michael Pittman Jr. for the team lead, but the conversion rate this game was straight up trash. He only caught 5 catches on 13 targets, like we just talked about. However, he did have 1 or 2 red zone targets that were, very close to him that I don't know if he could have made a play on them, but if he did, we're talking about an entirely different story. The good news here is that this guy is still not owned in 50% of leagues. What are we doing out here? Really? There's a guy like Josh Downs on the waivers and we're not picking him up? That's absolutely criminal to me. He had a 4-week stretch where he didn't score less than 13 fantasy points. Gardner Minshew has been playing, a little bit above average, I would say. In the next 2 games, he goes up against the Titans, who rank 27th against the pass, then the Bengals, who have been giving up a lot more big plays recently, who are 17th against the pass. I would have him in your lineups at least for those next 2 games, if not further on in the future. Just keep it in mind. Then we got Hollywood Brown. We finally saw a good week out of Hollywood Brown against the Los Angeles Rams. The 12 targets is what I'm really focusing on here in this matchup. I'm really glad to see that out of them, even though they were trailing the entire time and the game script was completely flipped, so they could not run the ball. But we really love to see this because of how he performed last season. When D-Hop was suspended, he was a shining star on this Cardinals team. Even though they weren't great, he was like one of the only bright spots on this team. Up to this point, his connection with Kyler Murray just really hasn't translated as well as we had hoped. But even in this game, he had 6 catches, but he had 12 targets. That's only a 50% catch rate, which leaves a ton of room for more improvement. If they can get on the same page here in the next couple of weeks, it's going to be absolutely huge for fantasy managers, because their schedule in the playoffs is so easy. All right. They play the Steelers next week. That's, they don't have a great passing defense. The 49ers don't have a great passing defense. The Bears don't have a great passing defense. And the Eagles don't have a great passing defense. So, a lot of favorable matchups right there. I wouldn't be surprised if him and Trey McBride, who I also am very high on, continue to dominate for the rest of the season. A little bit lower on James Conner because, as you can tell, these matchups are a little more, the defensive lines have been playing up to par, whereas the secondaries are the real struggle on those teams. Now we're moving on to Bijan Robinson. The breakout has already started here, but I'm not going to leave Bijan off this list. We talked about him in the last video. Thank God it wasn't a joke, Arthur Smith. Like we were talking about this last time. We were saying if this was one sick joke that Arthur Smith was going to play on us and then not give Bijan any touches after that bye week, we're going to be pissed. But apparently he finally learned. Wow, imagine that. 11 weeks into the season, you finally learned that you can give your star player the ball more times than not, and he's going to actually help you beat the Saints. That's crazy how that works, isn't it, buddy? Holy moly. And that playoff schedule should have you ready to take the championship home, because they go up against the Panthers, the Colts, who both have bad run defenses, then the Chicago Bears in the final 3 games. Chicago has been playing a little bit better as of late, but Bijan getting that many touches is absolutely unstoppable. Make sure this guy is in all of your lineups. Same exact thing goes for Jonathan Taylor here. The explosion has already started, but he also has to be on this list. Very similar situation for me as Bijan Robinson. Just get the man the ball as much as humanly possible. It's cool throwing Zach Moss in the rotation every 5 to 10 plays, but you gotta stop giving this man full drives. It's not good for fantasy purposes. I realize that, Zach Moss needs his touches. That's fine, but in a selfish fantasy mindset, Jonathan Taylor should be the only running back out there. Okay, I'm just messing around. There's no way that's actually going to happen, but if it did, I wouldn't be complaining. The rest of the season schedule is very favorable, especially in the playoffs. They get the Steelers, then the Falcons. Falcons are a little bit tough at certain times, but then the Raiders. So 2 easy matchups, 2 really easy matchups, 1 kind of difficult, mediocre type matchup there, but Jonathan Taylor should continue to explode rest of the season. And then the last person I wanted to throw on this list before some honorable mentions is Jaylen Waddle. I threw Waddle last on this list because I am really only confident in the next couple of weeks for him. In week 12 against a stingy Jets defense, that Black Friday game there, he had 8 catches for 114 yards, which was obviously great. His problem this season so far has been his consistency catching his targets. The next 2 matchups, they go against the Commanders and then the Titans, who both give up a ton of passing yards. And we all know Tua plays much better against teams that are bad, obviously, than good. All right. I don't believe they've beat a team that was positive, unless I'm mistaken, in a long time. Now, after those 2 games that we just talked about, they end up going against the Jets again, which is a pretty tough matchup against the defense, Cowboys, and the Ravens. So that lineup makes me a little bit nervous to say he's going to be doing big things. I would obviously have more confidence, if I'm being real with you guys, in Tyreek Hill in those matchups, just because he's so much faster and can get open more than Jaylen Waddle could against those secondaries. Honorable mentions before we head out on this video. We have Devonta Smith. He has been absolutely killing it while Dallas Goedert is out, and he did that last season. So he will continue to do so until Dallas Goedert is back in the lineup, and maybe even a week or two after he's back in the lineup, because he might not be 100% healthy. They might push him back into the game when he's not fully 100%. And in that situation, Devonta Smith is going to be there, you know, cashing in on those opportunities like he has been these past couple of weeks. And then I want to talk about Deebo Samuel and Brandon Aiyuk. Deebo finally had a good week. Brandon Aiyuk continues to catch those long touchdowns. Both of these guys are looking great for the rest of the season here, and I wouldn't be surprised if they both continue playing great. Anyways, guys, if you enjoyed this video, make sure, as always, drop a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you are new. I'll catch you in the next video. Hopefully, you guys are in the playoffs or really close to making it. We all need to win our fantasy championships. Let's get out there and do it. Peace.